So we are wanting to welcome Lauren Taylor-Lee, who is one of our current M.F.A. students, and she's just finishing her degree. So a huge round of applause and congratulations for Lauren this evening. And she's going to talk to you about her M.F.A. work, as well as her exhibition, Nurture. Again, it's currently on display in the Patrick Gallery upstairs in Rutledge. It will be on view till Friday. And so Friday you could view it if you haven't seen it yet. The hours are from 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. But that is the final day of our show. So please, I hope you take an opportunity to go up and see it if you haven't seen it yet. So to tell you a little bit about our speaker this evening, Lauren Taylor-Lee is an interdisciplinary artist and educator from Anderson, South Carolina. She received her B.F.A. in painting and sculpture from Clemson University in 2012 and is again currently completing her M.F.A. at Winthrop in studio art. She uniquely combines her love of materials with found objects to explore the many aspects of life that intrigue her, such as interpersonal connections, memory, and the healing properties of art making. Since the start of her artistic career, she has displayed her work in a variety of galleries and art organizations around the South, as always striving to share her unique vision with the world. And she currently resides, the practicing artist, in Charlotte, North Carolina. So we welcome Lauren this evening. Welcome, Lauren.
Thank you so much, Karen. And thank you, everybody, for coming. 79 people? Oh, that's crazy. There's absolutely no way we could have this type of turnout in person without taking the pandemic into consideration. So it's amazing. Thank God for technology. So thank you all for coming, and hang tight. I hope that you enjoy my hopefully not too long spiel of my M.F.A. thesis show. I'm going to go ahead and begin, if that's all right, and share my presentation with you all. Okay. Nurture is a series of sculptural and performative works created to explore the emotional and psychological effects of objects as they relate to familial memory and the various processes one uses to nurture and express love. These moments encapsulate the need for comfort and connection, the need to be nourished, the need for protection, and the need to remember. The filmed interactions with each individual sculpture evoke the natural relationship of emotional release to the processes of remembering and healing. I use sculpture as a residue of performance and create work that serves as a memory of interaction and experience. I'm interested in investigating connections between humans by blurring the distance between the artist, the art, and the audience. This body of work explores aspects of feminist theory, the historical use of Fluxus, Nel Nodding's The Ethics of Care, Darwin's classic essay, Emotions in Man and Animals, and Maurice Halbwachs' theories on collective memory. So, you might ask, how did this body of work about the ideas of nurturing come to be? Well, from the time I was a little girl, my dad and I would make things together. He was taught carpentry from his father and was constantly fixing things and working on endless home improvement projects, carefully and skillfully crafting each object. These objects became symbols of love, and naturally, I began to associate the act of mending, repairing, and creating with the expression of love. I would spend hours following him around, watching him work with various tools in his workshop, learning how to build, mend, and care for objects as he gave me tasks and taught me the name and purpose of each tool. This love for creating and repairing is something that I've carried into my adult life as an artist. Throughout our lives, we come into contact with so many objects that we have lost a connection to remembering who has made them or to whom they belong. Finding a way to honor these objects and utilize them became my sole intention in my art making practice. I find creating art to be an incredibly useful way to confront and process memories of personal trauma. Discovering how this has impacted my life and my art making process was the key to finding my identity as an artist. I was taught by my family to put love into everything you touch. So I began thinking of all the ways that I nurture others through specific processes, including all of the ways that I was nurtured throughout my life, and how I could utilize collected and created objects to demonstrate these acts through my work. I'm a collector of found objects. I collect objects in order to remember specific moments throughout my life. I have a terrible memory, and an object is something physical to hold on to that has a direct effect of nostalgia. Unknown objects hold power. They carry with them the imprint of their previous home and hold memories of a previous moment in time. So, by utilizing found objects in my work, I'm drawing attention to seemingly ordinary objects and making the unfamiliar familiar. As you enter the gallery, the first piece you will see on the right is titled Hug. Hug is a sculpture created out of plaster, galvanized wire, and steel, and is accompanied by a filmed performance. Imprinted with the shape of my hug, the plaster sculpture is fed warmth and heated from within by a small steel stove. In the performance, I'm standing on a mountaintop, in the winter, exposed and vulnerable to the elements. I'm feeding wood into the stove, which in turn heats and warms my body as I hug the piece. This piece explores my own personal need to comfort and be comforted. A primordial need that we all share as humans is the need for an emotional connection with another human being. Loneliness among millennials is at an all-time high, with a staggering 30% claiming to always or often feel lonely. Young adults are using technology more than ever to help maintain their social relationships and to feel socially connected to those around them. But people who tend to hug experience a reduction in stress due to feeling loved and more secure. It is the way people feel connected. Hugging therapy is a powerful way of healing, and research shows that hugging is extremely effective at healing a variety of physical and mental issues. I began to think of different ways of expressing love and care and asked myself, what would the imprint of a hug look like? That night, I dreamt of creating a sculpture that would serve as a visual projection of the body in space, simply indented with the squeeze of a hug, a form that was physically familiar, yet not immediately identifiable. I contemplated this idea for 2 years, and when I finally began making this piece, I imagined it as an interactive piece that would allow others to approach it and give or receive a warm, comforting hug. However, as this piece evolved and I spent endless days and weeks sanding the surface down in an extremely physical yet nurturing act, I realized I was not creating this piece for others. In reality, I had created a piece that would and could only be hugged by myself. This was an interesting duality for me as I went from creating work that was intended to nurture others and be interactive to creating work that nurtured myself and served solely as a memory of my interaction and experience. The second piece in the series is titled Spill, an installation centered around the concept of collective memory and nostalgia. As I was looking through my collection of found objects one day, I rediscovered an old aluminum pencil sharpener. It still had the pencil shavings inside, and as I opened the container, the shavings spilt all over the floor. The smell of the shavings and the act of spilling them triggered a memory. I was immediately taken back to the 4th grade, standing at the front of the classroom and struggling to sharpen my pencil, accidentally knocking the pencil sharpener onto the floor, creating this obscenely loud and very embarrassing noise, while pencil shavings spilt everywhere. I began to realize that while this was a specific memory of my own, it was likely that many of my peers shared the exact same memory. In fact, it was likely that every person born who has ever had to sharpen a pencil in an academic setting would share a version of this memory. Attached to the wall is a pencil sharpener with a hole drilled into the bottom of it. So as I sharpen my pencil throughout the performance, the shavings begin to fall to the ground, forming a pile that increases with each action. In front of the pencil sharpener hangs 2 sheets of clear acrylic, etched with the written memory. In the filmed performance, which is projected onto the piece, I'm recalling a specific memory by sharpening my pencil and writing the memory onto the wall. In the performance, my body is separated from the actual piece by the suspended sheets of acrylic, serving as a boundary representative of a moment in time that I physically could not return to. The act of projecting the film onto the remnants of the performance transformed the meaning of the piece, allowing it to serve as a physical representation of a memory. At the end of the filmed performance, the pencil sharpener spills onto the floor, recalling my initial act of nostalgia, and my digital body exits the frame only to return again indefinitely. The 3rd piece in the series is titled Tethered. Tethered is a sculpture about the importance of relationships. My sister is 2 years older than I am, and we're very close. I always received her hand-me-downs growing up. I wanted to find a way to demonstrate the connection that siblings or close loved ones share, as well as the nurturing act of being clothed by another person's clothing. Hand-me-downs carry with them the history of the previous wearer, as the smell of their body and detergent lingers within the threads. I have quite a large collection of hand-me-downs from my sister and my mom, and I often think about the nurturing act that passing on worn clothing to another person embodies, this act of clothing another. The sculpture consists of 2 large boulders. They're attached to each other through a braided strand of hand-me-down clothing. The boulders are created similarly to a jawbreaker candy, with knotted clothing and concrete repeatedly layered on top of one another to form a collective mass. Each boulder is extremely heavy, very difficult to move, and it's really hard to even move this sculpture without help from another person. Without the progression of both boulders moving forward, neither would advance. This is a representation of a close relationship, or how one needs a connection with another human to grow and advance through life. The layers of cloth and concrete resemble time. As time goes on, more layers were added. As the boulders roll throughout the filmed performance, crumbs of the concrete fall off, exposing the layers below and revealing the past memories embodied within the boulders. The boulders stand at a distance that is close enough for the people rolling them to touch hands, maintaining the importance of physical contact in a relationship. My filmed performance with the sculpture consists of me attempting to roll the boulders along a path, exposing the difficulties with various turns, hills, and valleys that occur as obstacles along the way. At times, it seems that I have a rhythm of how to advance on my own. However, it soon becomes very apparent how difficult it is to take this journey alone. The need for another's help is apparent in the struggle and demonstrated throughout the performance. The fourth piece in this series is titled Pockets. As a collector, my art-making process typically begins with inspiration from a specific object. Whether it's the wheel of an old wheelbarrow, a weathered cooking pot, the button drawer from an antique sewing machine, or my great-grandmother's leather gloves. These objects in this piece were each used to nurture and nourish, and they bear the scars of years of use. For me, collecting is a process of celebrating and fostering objects that were once useful, but have lost their identity and purpose throughout time. I, in turn, allow these objects to become part of me and give them a new life and identity through my work. Sewn strips of gauze float in space to form a semi-transparent plane, with casts of my hands anchoring these to the walls. Within the plane, there are individually created pockets for a series of personal objects that each relate to familial memories. The heavier objects stretch the gauze, separate the weave, pulling the plane down towards the ground, whereas the lighter objects hang delicately in their pockets, just below the plane. Gauze is a finely textured material that historically wraps and protects and heals, and I wanted to embody this idea of protection by creating unique homes to house these objects, places where they can safely exist. This sculpture acts as my personal keepsake box of sorts, suspended in space by individual casts of my hands, desperately holding on to these memories. Two films playing simultaneously side by side accompany this piece. In one, I have installed the sculpture outside and allowed the weather to permeate the pockets. As the rain gets heavier, the pockets hang closer to the ground, pushed by the weight of the water. The rain falls through the pockets, passes by the objects, and collects into 5 vessels below, representing the 5 members of my family. The rain metaphorically demonstrates the passage of time, memory, and life. In the second film, a black silhouette of a female body, distinctive because of the waist and hips, is shown. In this performance, I am caressing each object, spending time with each, and allowing myself to relive the specific memory that object triggers. In these films, I wanted to find a subtle way of bringing in ideas of domesticity and caregiving, while also representing the organic nature of giving life and love to something. This process of sewing custom pockets for each item and then placing the items within the pockets served as a way to allow me to remember and reflect on memories and relationships associated with each item. I have chosen to document my performances through the lens of a camera. It's important for me to be able to interact with these pieces alone in order to get the most emotionally honest reaction I can. And I found that the filming process allows me to have a truly private experience with each of my sculptures. Performance art has historically been used as an effective medium for feminist artists to communicate urgent messages about their life experiences, emotions, and the condition of women. I realized that through creating performative films and sculptures, I'm able to connect with my audience in a more personal and emotional way. This is something that I've been searching for in my work, a way to connect to others through a shared experience or memory. Take, for example, the emotional power that music carries. When you hear a song, for a moment, the melody takes over and has the power to evoke an uncontrollable emotional reaction in you. It could be because the song reminds you of a specific memory or person or simply because an automatic response is triggered by the way that the notes tickle your eardrums. The sculptor Lydia Barlow once said, "Sculpture is very similar to music. And the moment you move with it, around it, and the residue is what you're left with." I think residue is a lovely word. It brings with it what was before and what's left behind, in a manner very similar to the way memories work. Memories leave within an individual the residue of an event or moment in time. I was taught to make bread at a young age, and the smell of baking bread evokes pleasant childhood memories. The process of kneading dough, in particular, is something that I feel embodies a nurturing act through touch. It's a physical and meditative process that allows you to stop and think for a moment, focusing only on what your hands are creating and who will be enjoying the fruits of your labor. It's a loving act that ends with the nourishing of another. For my fifth and final piece in my series, Needed, I created an interactive sculpture focused on the experience of sharing and breaking bread with others, as well as a demonstration of the nurturing act of feeding something in order to keep it alive. However, in response to the COVID-19 pandemic and how it has completely changed the way that we live life and interact with others, I've decided to alter this piece slightly in order to reflect the current lack of shared experiences. The sculpture consists of a large kitchen table. It sits in the gallery, the center of the gallery space. The kitchen table was found on the side of the road, bruised with years of use. It was originally missing its center leaf, so I crafted a new one from salvaged wood, and I spent weeks sanding and nurturing the table to repair it to its original glory and give it a life once again. The remnants from the sanding process are collected within the vessel below the table. There's a projected film onto this sawdust that includes an accumulation of different hands kneading dough. They are all sharing in this nurturing act, bypassing the boundaries of location and time. The kitchen table was the heart of my childhood home. It was the communal place where my family gathered each day to talk about their experiences and share with each other. The place where we were nourished and nurtured mentally and physically day by day. On the center of the table exists a large plaster vessel, created from the cast of my sister's pregnant torso. Within this vessel sits a jar containing the mother dough. It was fermented from the naturally occurring yeast that lives within the air of my home. I've been feeding this mother dough for months, once a day, in order to keep it alive. Surrounding this are hundreds of individually crafted vessels that each represent the different curvatures of the human form. These cups were supposed to be filled with baked bread, but now these cups sit empty. We are not able to sit together with loved ones or even strangers and break bread any longer. We would be risking our own health and the health of our loved ones by the simple act of congregating for a meal. This is an act that upon reflection, I realized I took advantage of. There is isolation in this pandemic. We are isolated from loved ones, and many times I find myself being the sole consumer of my cooking. This experience that I so enjoy, this act of cooking for others and having them be nurtured through my labor, is currently on pause. This quarantine forced me to reflect and remember. I long for moments once again when my loved ones will enjoy a meal together, where we can join, break bread, and be nurtured through a shared experience. This year, for the first time, on Thanksgiving, Christmas, Hanukkah, my house will not be filled with loved ones laughing, eating, and drinking together. My house and kitchen table will be like this, full yet empty, ready for a gathering and experience that is on hold until further notice. Until then, I find myself waiting and longing for these moments that we can share a collective, nurturing experience together. I created all of these works before the COVID-19 pandemic struck the world and changed the way that we live our lives forever. Initially, I created all of these works to embody various acts of nurturing. Excuse me. Initially, nurturing objects, nurturing oneself, and nurturing others were the key ideas. This is still what these works are about. And I would be lying if I said that the pandemic hasn't changed the way that I approach the idea of nurturing now. This exhibition now speaks to me through the lens of our shared experiences, isolation being a big one. How can I nurture others in isolation? How has this quarantine changed the way I interact with others, myself, and my art? This exhibition as a whole serves as a representation of the passage of time, with each piece you experience representing a phase of life. Hug has taken on a whole new perspective for me. It now more than ever demonstrates the isolation we feel, being quarantined away from loved ones, in constant fear of potentially infecting them and losing them forever. It also represents the first phase of life, the initial physical contact we experience at birth. As soon as you were born, you were put into someone's arms. This is a need we all share as humans, this need to be comforted and held. Spill is childhood. In it, I'm reliving a childhood memory, one that for some unknown reason had a profound impact on me. It demonstrates how smell has such a strong nostalgic effect and the strength of collective memory. Tethered is a journey through life with the demonstration of the need for support from others to grow, or as I see it, adolescence. Pockets is the remembrance of lost loved ones. It's in an almost ritualistic way. This is typically something you don't begin to appreciate until later in life, when you begin to lose loved ones, or the memories of them begin to fade. This is adulthood. And needed is about the collective need of experience, the appreciation of moments with loved ones, as well as the continuous need we share throughout our lives for both physical and mental nourishment. I guess all of these works were created from within me, because each of them represent a part of who I am. And they're all a reflection of the life that I've lived so far. Each one exemplifies an aspect of life that I find important. Comfort, nostalgia, independence, remembrance, and nourishment. And that's the end of my presentation. Thank you.
Bravo. Well done.
Sorry, I'm sniffling the whole time. I don't have any tissues. I'm so sorry.
Oh, no, I was going to say we can give you a second if you need to go run and grab something.
I think I'll be fine. Thank you.
Okay, wonderful. Well, thank you, Lauren.
Okay.
Yeah. Does anybody have any questions for Lauren? I know, bravo. Very nice.
Now I want bread. Yes, me too.
Yes, Marley, please.
As an artist, what do you think that a statue or a sculpture in being interactive is as important as the sculpture itself? I think I'm asking that the right way. I'm not sure.
So I think it depends on what you're trying to get from your audience and what the purpose of making that piece was. Like for me, sculptures that are interactive are a way different experience than ones that aren't. And so, creating interactive sculpture is a whole different ballgame, but also like sculpture in itself is an experience. So you have to experience sculpture in person. It's completely different than looking at pictures or videos of the work, experiencing it and being able to walk around the work. And for me, being able to touch the work is a big thing. So that's why, I'm the first person at every museum to get in trouble for touching the work because I want to experience the tactility that the artist got to experience. And so, in all of these pieces, I have a little bit of that tactile element demonstrated in it. For the hug, there's ash from that piece, from the fire, and the flour kneaded is dusted all over the table, and there's dirt in the pockets piece, and the concrete crumbles and tethered, and the pencil shavings and spills. So like that tactility is an experience that you only get in person. Does that make sense? I hope I answered your question.
Yes, it does. I feel the same way. That's why I was asking, because every sculpture you made had a sense of interactiveness to it, and I appreciate that.
Thank you.
Riley. John.
Hey, Lauren. Congratulations on a wonderful show. Could you tell us a little bit about, your M.F.A. career has been 3 years long. Could you tell us a little bit about at what point you realized that nurturing was going to be the subject of your exhibition and the major subject of your research?
Oh, so yeah. Well, it was really just the past 3 years of my MFA experience has been, a complete just self-investigation into trying to figure out who I am as an artist and why I make the work, why I make art, why do I make art? So in leading up to my thesis, I was doing, I was really investigating my process and trying to figure out, why I make work the way that I do and why I choose found objects to make work with, and why that's important to me. And so somewhere along the line, probably with a lot of your help and encouragement, I realized that I collect objects and I utilize found objects because they help me remember things, and because I have a terrible memory. And so that physical object is my emotional connection to a specific time or place. And so from that, I began to realize that also every object that I was creating, I was nurturing in some way. I was repairing it, I was sanding it, I was, like that process of taking care of it in a way to like make it better, I guess, was something that I repeatedly did in everything that I created. And I'm a very nurturing person. And so it just made sense that this work would be all within that same theme and that idea. And once I kind of like decided on that word being my key theme for the show, all of the works kind of fell into that category without even trying. Every work that I made from then on, it was, okay, here's this connection to why that connects to this nurturing act. And it just made sense.
Wonderful. Thank you. Can I ask another question, Karen?
Yeah, of course.
Okay, I've observed you for the last 3 years working down in sculpture. Can you talk about the importance and the value of working alongside other MFA students and how that has affected your progress as an artist?
Yeah, so I think that, this experience of being in a program and being surrounded by like-minded individuals that are also, striving to explore their creative talents and figure out who they are, what their identity is as an artist and a person, is so helpful. And you can't get that same type of experience. I mean, you can, I guess, eventually on your own, but it would take a lot longer to get there. And so, like, it's astounding the amount of progress one can make in such a short amount of time simply by being in a program where they're surrounded by like-minded individuals. You feed off of each other, you feed off of each other's energy and each other's creativity, and you inspire each other. And also you have like this constant support system of artists and peers that you can bounce your ideas off of. And that's so helpful, because we tend as artists to get trapped in our minds that, it sometimes paralyzes us in the making process. So if you can run your ideas quickly past a couple of talented individuals that are also artists, it's so helpful to kind of keep moving and keep chugging along. And that, I mean, my colleague Anna and I, we used to experience our dynamic. A lot of people know Anna Dean, but we fed off of each other the whole time. And so there was this back and forth and this competitiveness between us that really helped us push each other to make better work. So, yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, John.
Love you, Anna.
Next question is from Anna Cato.
Hi. So I noticed that you had a lot of performance elements. I was wondering if ever performing your art and then there have been like people walking by, has anyone ever approached you? What do you do in that kind of situation?
Yeah. So actually, funny background note, the piece Tethered, which is the big boulders, I had a team of really willing and wonderful, strong female students that helped me move that piece to where I needed to perform it in public. And we actually almost got the cops called on us, because when you are doing performance art in a public setting, sometimes it goes off great, but typically there's a lot of issues. And, I'm all about the ask forgiveness and not for permission, because as an artist, typically explaining the weird ideas that you have to non-art people doesn't go off too well, and you get turned down a lot. So it's better to just try and see what happens, but yeah, when you're performing in a public setting, that really was the only piece that I did like around people. And everyone who passed by was very friendly and asking about the work and very nice, but it was the park officials that were not having it. And so we just had to do it as fast as we could, get the footage and get out of there. And the rest of the pieces were fine because I was doing them just totally by myself. So I could have that like truly private experience with them. But because that piece was so large and so heavy, I just had to have people to help me. And so, yeah, that was definitely a fun experience, but I got what I needed. So.
Great, thank you. Good question, Anna. Next is Grace Callum.
Hello.
Hey, Grace.
First, I just want to say you did a great job, and I love you and your presentation. It's amazing.
Thank you.
My question for you is about your performance process, because I find myself, I'm a lot like you, and I like to perform, but I have a hard time. I want to react to my work. I don't want to act, and do you have to constantly re-record yourself to see what you're doing, or how do you normally go about things?
I think it depends on what each piece is. So usually I have some type of idea in my mind as to what I'm going to get out of that. And I want to say that I'm a planner, but I'm really, when it comes to performance art, I just kind of go and see what happens and respond after the fact. So a lot of these pieces, I mean, really all of these pieces weren't fully finished until I installed them in the gallery. Like even after editing all the footage and films, and it wasn't finished until I saw them with the sculpture and like had a chance to sit and reflect and write about what I was experiencing. And so for me, I mean, everybody's different. Some people approach performance art very strategically and everything's very planned out. But for me, I think it's more helpful, at least for the work I created in this show, to just kind of wing it, set up a tripod, like perform or experience what I was planning, and then get the footage later and see if I got what I needed out of that. And sometimes you do, and sometimes you don't, and you have to reshoot. But luckily I was able to get enough of what I needed to convey out of each one of these times that I shot. So, I mean, it's just trial and error, to be honest. It's better to be open and not, try to plan every step along the way, because the more open you are, the more open you are to allowing yourself to respond to what happened. Thanks, Grace. Also, Grace was one of the people that helped me with the boulder piece of the park police. So, girl power.
Yes. That's great. Our next question is from Kai Griffin.
Hello, Lauren. Congratulations.
Thank you.
My question is, you've shared with me that your work is an exploration into your own psyche and exploring it and then making breakthroughs with it. So being that the work is so personal and intuitive to you, how do you want people to experience, or what type of takeaway would you want people to have from your work?
That's a great question. So, it's difficult because I want to approach it as openly as I possibly can, and that my only goal in creating these works is to somehow affect my viewers in an emotionally reactive way. So whether they too can relate to ideas of protection or remembering or losing loved ones, or connections and relationships. I mean, I think that all these pieces, they're deeply, deeply personal and really, really emotional and really hard to not only make but to talk about. But I don't want to control. When I started making these pieces, I just decided that I wasn't going to control the way the viewer reacts to my piece. I don't specifically want them to react in a certain way. And if I had these pieces all be interactive, then I would. But because I changed my notion and realized that instead of creating interactive works, I was creating all these pieces for myself to interact with, for my own experiences, to nurture myself. And for that, it doesn't, I don't want to sound like, rude, but it doesn't really matter what everybody else gets out of it, because I got what I needed. So I could everybody makes art in a different way and for different reasons, but for me, I could go my whole life without one person seeing what I make, and that's fine, because I make art for myself to, have revelations and heal and get past things and grow, and other people, hopefully they'll get something out of it. But if they don't, they don't. If they do, amazing. I wanted to make work that I felt could connect to my guests, my viewers, in a more emotional way somehow. I was really tired of making artwork that I had no connection to emotionally. You make stuff that's pretty and you sell it, it's it's great, but what does it mean? It didn't make me feel anything. So that's where all these feelings kind of came into this series.
Wonderful.
That's awesome. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Good question, Kel. Next, we have Anna Deacon.
Hello, Lauren. First of all, say I am so proud of you. I feel so blessed because I got to see this whole body of work develop. I was sitting right beside you when you were squishing all those vessels, and I'm so lucky that I got to see all the iterations, and I'm so grateful that we got to go through this together because you really pushed me, and I couldn't have done the work I did without you, so kudos to you. One thing I've always admired about you is how reflective you are and how thoughtful you are about what you're making. And I know one of the big concepts that came out of this work was the idea of residue and what's left behind after something is done. And my question for you is, what is the residue that is on your skin right now from your M.F.A. experience? Like, what is it that's going to stick with you, and what are you going to take forward, and how do you, that's a big question.
Yeah, Anna, okay, way to throw a ringer in there. Yeah, the residue that sticks with me is like, okay, if I have to put it in one word, it's transformation. So let me try to say this without getting emotional. Hold on. Okay, so throughout this journey, you just grow so much. Like what I was explaining to Sean earlier, it's like leaps and bounds, mentally, physically, emotionally, that you grow in such a short span of time. And so, I mean, I haven't even like fully processed everything, obviously, yet. I did spend a whole day after I installed my work to sit and kind of just like process and reflect on all my pieces, because I didn't have a chance to do that until they were all installed. But yeah, there's so much residue. It's so thick. There's lots, and it's going to be lots of layers to kind of scrub off, but I don't want to scrub them off. I want them to stay forever. And, teaching, having the opportunity to teach at Winthrop was such a huge, growth for me as a person too, because not only am I trying to teach myself and learn and grow through these like personal triumphs, but I'm also trying to get my students to do the same thing. And so I'm experiencing this firsthand, but then I'm throwing it at them, and I'm like, you need to experience this too. Like, this is what you need to do to push yourself. And so like that simple act of like not only experiencing transformation individually, but also projecting that and teaching other people how to do that is it's just priceless. Like, you can't get that experience. Like I said, you can't get that experience on your own. You have to, I'm a nurturer. I have to nurture others and myself simultaneously to keep growing. And so I don't know if that answered your question, but thank you for making me cry.
Love you, friend. Good job. Excellent work.
Love you.
Great. Wonderful. We've got several more questions here for you.
Awesome.
Yeah. So, Nico Sweet?
Hi. My question isn't quite as deep, but it's more of a curiosity about your dinner table. Were you thinking of doing that before you found the table, or did the table inspire you to make this?
So the table inspired me completely. Like I said, almost every one of the pieces that I ever make are usually inspired by an object to begin with. I'm one of those people that I'm constantly working on 10 different projects simultaneously, and I never know where they're going to go. And so intuition is a huge, huge part of my art making process. And so I try to stay as open as I possibly can to receiving whatever the world is telling me to do at that time. And so when I was walking down the street of my neighborhood, I saw that kitchen table, and I was like, I don't know what I'm going to do with that, but I want it, and I'm going to start. And so I just took it to my studio and started refinishing it. And then as I was spending hours and days and weeks sanding it and refinishing it, through that process is when I developed the piece. And so usually in that moment when my hands are moving and creating, it's kind of meditative, and that's when my brain can finally shut everything else out and focus on process and what I'm doing and why that's important and how can I express that through my work. So yeah, that's how I create work in general. It's always starts from one thing, and I never know where that's going to end up. But a lot of people aren't like that.
Thank you. Next we have Tyra Sweeney.
Hey, so my question is a little bit different. I'm not a very artistic person, or I'm a writer, but I want to be a future teacher. This is my last year, and one of the things that I struggle with, even teaching now, I teach pre-K, and one of the things I struggle with is art. So what is some advice that you can give to me as far as like transitioning into teaching like third graders, fourth graders? What is something that you can give me to help, being that I'm not, like I said, I'm not artistic, but I do want to incorporate art into my classroom. So what is something that you can give me that I am able to use in my classroom as far as like maybe having an object and letting students write about it, or giving them a topic? Like, what would you recommend?
I mean, I think what you just said it, like start with an object and ask your students to respond to it. Like, what does this object remind you of? Make a list. For me, like that's kind of where I start in all of my like inspirational processes. Is I start thinking of how can I make connections between memories and objects, or smells and people, or and it's always in a list form. And so whether you take an object and you're like, okay, today we're going to I want you to look at this object, I want you to pick it up and touch it and respond to it. So if you respond by drawing the object, then great. If you want to paint it, then awesome. If you want to make it out of clay, great. If you want to make a list of what that object reminds you of, all of those things are artistic. And so, art is such a umbrella term, and being an artist is such an umbrella term. So like there's not one right or wrong way to teach art, to make art, to be an artist. It's all just an expression of creativity, and it's a means to an end. So whether you are an artist because you're a writer and that's how you express yourself, like that's just as profound as making sculpture or making paintings. It's just a way that individuals feel a need to express themselves through a medium. And so I think the most important thing you could possibly do for third graders is teach them that they can express themselves in all of these different ways. And as soon as they can understand that, they're going to take off like leaps and bounds for third grade. So that's what I would recommend for you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
That's great. Yes, good solution. One more question from Devan Gardner.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
I just wanted to ask a question about how, from a student's perspective, how do you organize and filter all of the information from your professors, your mentors, peers, family, all of that feedback that you get from them, and combine all those ingredients into the one final piece?
With lots of time and energy and lots of lists. I make a lot of lists. I'm not a sketcher. I'm not a drawer, but my sketchbooks are filled with words and really terrible, sketches. But for me, that's how I process. I will listen and I take notes, and then I go back and I read what I wrote and think about what they said and then write down more. And then when I'm making, like I said, when I'm allow myself to just make and sit and move my hands and kind of knock everything else out, I think about what was said. And that's when I am able to make connections as to how am I going to demonstrate this? How can I get this across? How are the viewers going to get this, what I'm getting? It's all about like art. Art is about making connections, and making art is about revelations. So you realize that, okay, this is one way to express creativity. This is one way to express sadness. This is one way to express love, and there's not one right or wrong way, but it each changes depending on who you are, your preconceived notions and experiences put onto that, but then also that changes depending on who's viewing it. And so, yeah, the way I approach it is lots of note taking and then processing and then making. And the best advice I could give you in being an M.F.A. student is be as open as you possibly can so that you're not blocking out any information that's coming to you, and you can just be a sponge. Just absorb it all and, let it happen. Some people who are very type A are like, that's not how I think, but like, that's what worked for me.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Does anybody else have any questions for Lauren? Some great questions this evening.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, it looks like everybody's asked their questions. I have one, if you don't mind, just shortly. I'm just curious about, so you've taken this sort of concept of nurture, presented that within these pieces and this body of work. I'm curious if you could speak to the choices then you made for how that was going to be presented in the gallery.
Yeah. So that was, I think, the most difficult part is making those decisions of how this is going to be presented, because ultimately how you present it is how your viewers are going to perceive it. And so for me, I wanted these really large projections so that the viewers can be immersed from my experience. But then it was really important for me to allow them to experience the tactility that I experienced in making the pieces. So that's why I included all those different elements. But then also I wanted them to see that this sculpture acts as a residue of performance. So I didn't make these sculptures just to present the sculptures. I made the sculptures to experience something with them, and then they're presented as a residue of that experience. And so for me, realizing that that's what I was doing was groundbreaking. And then that's when it all kind of came together. And it wasn't until I had every piece in the gallery set up where I was envisioning that I made the connections between the whole entire show and how each piece acted as a different kind of phase of life for me. And that was a whole nother, aha moment. So, yeah.
Yeah. Well done. I do appreciate the fact that you are very conscious in as many of the M.F.A. students are, but you too as well, sort of thinking outside the box in terms of what we do in a space like that, and then how that can be, the whole concept can come through. The tactility, as you were talking about, and that nature, right down to, I appreciate the words on the floor that were three-dimensional and of material and had a material quality. So it was well thought out. So congratulations on that. So
thank you.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much. I'm going to now paste the Quiltrit link in the chat for everybody. If you've got questions on that, please let me know. Please fill that out so that you're able to get cultural event credit for this evening. But A wonderful talk. Thank you. Wonderful questions from our audience. Greatly appreciated. Congratulations again, Lauren.
Thank you so much. Thank you, everybody, for listening. I really appreciate it.